I'm really excited to hear from Linda today. Linda's a technology teacher and specialist in the state of New Hampshire. Linda has been ever present on these webinars and has contributed meaningfully in conversation that other guest presenters have led, and just always has something meaningful to say about her own implementation. So we asked Linda if she would please join us to present on her work.
And then some tips to keep it going. We had really great success with the launching, the initial, and we had many students pulling their iPhones out of their pockets and out of their pocketbooks and saying, you know, let's download these apps, let's go to the Google App Store. And then I started to think about how could we keep it going and keep the same focus. My expectation was definitely to make these apps meaningful to all learners, especially our high-set learners who have a very concentrated focus on passing the high-set. But how could they look at these apps as little 3-minute lessons on supporting or lengthening the studies that it would take for them to be able to complete the high-set testing? So personalizing it and the empowering them that they're on their own pathway, and these apps can support them with knowing that, you know, that they're not just following a free app, or we're not just suggesting a free app just for filler, just, you know, in their busy lives. That was something that I wanted, that message, I wanted to get that across to them, that these apps could definitely empower their learning pathways. And then to individualize it. So we have HiSET, and they were really great with the tapping, and they were really good with the navigating. But some of our lower basic ESL classes, they needed some individual guided instruction with the tapping and the navigating. That was their roadblock. And then supporting the facilitators, who sort of always were in the wings of things. They were not always actively engaging in the apps. So the tips to keep it going were those three sort of components were important to me. And so for the personalized learning and empowering the pathways, we created some postcards that emphasize the different content strands. This is just an example. This is just one postcard of the AmRita learning, and this is level K3, and it's lifestyles in the USA. So with this postcard, the intent was that it would spark their curiosity to go back into the app, hopefully, you know, 3 more times and beyond that, because they could see some really interesting reading passages here. And this is a front and a back postcard. And then the way that we could provide individualized guided instruction with that tapping and navigating was another postcard. And that postcard just, it really differentiated the different ways we can use our finger to access the app. And it's visual. There's not a lot of language in that postcard.
That is just wonderful.
The state of New Hampshire, what we did was we have the XPRIZE competition as a link on the Adult Education webpage, and we have a lot of wonderful resources to support our facilitators.
That's great. Again, Linda, it would be great if we could make sure that these are available to others on the XPRIZE team to customize.
Sure.
Had you tried this postcard idea with other online learning initiatives?
Well, the working with the New Hampshire mentor, Tiffany Brand, who's also has been also a part of the XPRIZE, we're trying to think about ways to expand our distance learning and ways to measure accountability of the hours spent in any type of distance learning. So this way here, the postcards can dovetail. They can be a springboard off of some teacher-accredited accountability for measuring distance learning. So the postcard for me is a way that we can differentiate and customize the offerings of distance learning, get it out. We have Plato as a state of New Hampshire, and Plato has a built-in measuring tool, so the hours spent in distance learning counts. So thinking of some other ways that we can build in that repertoire of different there's so many different tools, which the XPRIZE are wonderful tools to support learners, adult learners, either the ESL or the high-set learners. So trying to provide that concrete, goal setting also. You've completed 3, how about, 5, try for 5 more, building that self-determination, which sometimes can be lacking.
Right, excellent. And all this helps, all these extra support materials help.
The barriers, we had some difficulty for me as the technology specialist in the building. When we have, the XPRIZE apps on Android devices are very plentiful, and they're very different. So for me, I had a little bit of a barrier with navigating the variety of different Android devices that came my way. Some of our devices were older. Some of our devices didn't support the XPRIZE apps. Many of them did, though, so that was, not a barrier. It was really wonderful to know that the Androids and the operating system on the Androids are supporting the XPRIZE apps very nicely. And then we had some barriers with access to Wi-Fi at the school, where we are trying to launch all of this. We don't have Wi-Fi for everyone. Our Wi-Fi is somewhat limited. So that was a barrier. It was nice to identify that as a barrier, and for us as a center, how can we do that differently? How can we open up Wi-Fi to everyone? And the skill levels.
Actually, before you move on to that, do you mind, what were some of the things that you did do or add access?
Well, most of the students were able to get onto using their data. I thought that was a barrier. It was a fiscal sort of obligation on their part that I felt a little bit conscientious about. And then for some of the others who had a track phone type of Android, I just was able to get them onto our Wi-Fi.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. So some of the things going forward are, getting some hotspots and having open Wi-Fi through the various different hotspots. Great,
and referring obviously to places where that there's public Wi-Fi, I'm sure.
Yep.
Great, now tell me about these skill levels.
And the skill levels, we just had a plethora of different skill levels. So oftentimes, what can be a barrier, what starts off as a barrier, ends up as a strength. Because we had such varied skill levels with the cognitive learning via mobile apps, as well as the physical motor of tapping and gesturing, we just had a lot of different skill levels. And so it provided us with the opportunity for all teachers to roll up their sleeves also and get involved and to try to help out. So we would be 3 strong in differentiating those varied skill levels so that we could try to quickly move to getting them to an independent level. I think we broke through those barriers. I'm really, really, really proud to say we worked really hard. I'm so proud of the team that I worked with to try to narrow those skill levels. But early on, the first couple of days of launching the XPRIZE apps, the skill levels were a barrier.
Right. I'm curious about this. I'm wondering, you said it was a team effort. Did you actually double up facilitators in the first time you were introducing learners to apps? Does that be like what you had to do?
As a sort of a technology teacher, there's often times where I would just provide the instructional strategy for the class, and the teachers would sort of stay in the wings. With the iPad apps, I think when being the teachers that they are wanting to help and bring success, when they sort of saw some difficulty with skill levels, they jumped in. So they incidentally, it was baptism through fire, so they became active engagement facilitators in the classroom, which was wonderful.
Diana Satin is asking you a question I think would be interesting to hear the answer to. She asks, Well, she says, it'd be great to hear about some of the ways your team helps students break through the cognitive and physical motor barriers. Can you think back to something that you can identify as a effective support for them?
We provided them with as much frequent direct instruction as needed. So we would go in again, so the focus of the lesson would become the Learning Upgrade app one more time, and we would provide hands-on direct instruction, as well as we would be able to introduce some of the other apps at the time so that we could differentiate instruction, we could scaffold that difficulty, work more closely with those that were struggling cognitively, and then also we could have that self-pacing with the higher level cognitive students in the classroom. They could move on, and part of their difficulty was just with navigating to the next lesson. So once we got them to learn how to jump ahead or skip around, they were on their way, they were independent. We could spend some of our time back supporting the student who needed just more support with the cognitive part of it, knowing where to tap, knowing how to tap. The immediate feedback was really key to rapidly developing skills with the lower levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And maybe also those larger iPads for your learners who had less prior experience with devices. Interesting. So we have some time for those of you who are in the webinar to consider what Linda has shared and ask some questions. Linda, while people are thinking, I have a question for you. You mentioned something about the support you were providing to your facilitators and how you think you were doing it. You were doing some good things there. Can you talk about how you train facilitators on this project and then any ongoing support you provide them?
It was mostly, so for me, for my next step would be to reach out to some of our volunteer tutors that are with us through the summer and train them to become facilitators going forward. But with my April through June, my facilitators were the teachers. So I had an open door policy where they would come. It was really personalizing it for them, having a lot of narrative with them and encouraging them that mobile learning was not going to take away from classroom learning, but it was going to supplement it, and it could offer the students the immediate feedback of self-pacing. And so building facilitators out of teachers, it was just an end result that really wasn't part of the initial plan, but it was interesting how they became very excited about the apps once they were modeled and they could see the progress in the students.
Do the teachers themselves use the apps?
Yes. Yeah. And so part of the process of teaching students how to download the apps, it was, the teachers became part of, they are all at different skill levels also, so that they would partake of that training and they would download an app onto their phone.
Right. Great. Did most of your questions from the teachers come while they were engaging with the app as a learner, or was it around the actual functioning of the app, or was it around implementation?
There were a lot of questions. I think there were initial questions about, the purpose of the app and how it would be helpful to spend technology instruction time using an XPRIZE app. So we started to just talk about, the meaning of it and, the learning upgrade and how much singing is involved and is that a good thing and does that support language development. So really having really good heart-to-heart conversations about the andragogy of the app with teachers and sparking their interest and then bringing it into the classroom. And they already had some interest in it, so they would help to go around and facilitate as much as they could. And then if they had a question, they would ask a question. How do we get to the next level, or how do we, move beyond the initial login, the sign up? Those questions were pretty difficult for all of us. The login with learning upgrade was you sign up, then you log in. So getting
Mm-hmm.
the rhythm of it and getting the sync of it and getting familiar with the way that the app behaves was something that I was greatly appreciative of. The success of it was based on our success as a center to all be facilitators in the process.
Mm-hmm. So your examples about Learning Upgrade have been great. It sounds like that's the app that you were encouraging most, or maybe people were asking for first. Were there any other apps that you started to support or are currently supporting?
We're supporting all of them. I thought I wanted to be really careful to support all of them. It's just with the initial launch of the navigation and the being able to, we had some limitations, so we could only model them on the iPads. But it was always part and parcel with being able to say anyone else who wants to download them, we have AmReader, and marketing AmReader has the wonderful reading passages that it has, as well as Lost Words of Atlantis, which we just struck gold with different learning profiles. So the brochure, it sort of gave a synopsis of, this is the app if you like gaming, this is the app for reading passages, this is the app for texting, and let students be self-directed in selecting which one. Learning Upgrade was, it seemed to level the playing field with the language component. So when technology integrator is integrating a technology lesson, there's that language barrier. Technology vocabulary is multisyllabic. It's more challenging. So Learning Upgrade seemed to take away a lot of that language piece. So I could point to it. I could put it up on our dock camera and put it up on our smartboard, and I could show them the way to do it without a lot of language. Learning Upgrade, just the interface lent itself better to that kind of technology strategy. Had a lot of people really liking Cell Ed, modeled it once or twice, and then the students took off with it. So gaining independence, I can say, was a really wonderful outcome for the majority of the students at the center.
And what is the user profile of the learners who are drawn to Amrita? Or sorry, to Codex, the game, the Quest for Last Words?
I'm not so sure of the dynamic of the learner. I just think that it's somebody that maybe wants a little more of that Las Vegas effect in their learning.
Uh-huh.
A little more bells and whistles to it. Yeah.
All right. So maybe a little bit more tech savvy, maybe somebody who is a gamer.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Linda's generously answered all of mine. If not, know everyone on the call that I'm going to be reaching out to Linda to see if we can see samples of all of the resources that she mentioned. And so hopefully we'll be able to provide them as examples of work that you could do in your own site very, very soon. Okay, next up